All right, I think we will get started. So welcome again, everybody, on behalf of Holocaust Museum LA. My name is Sam Butlin, and I am the Visitor Services Associate at the museum. I am pleased to welcome you to our discussion with Phil Raucher, a Holocaust survivor from Poland. Before we begin, I would like to share a few words about the museum. Holocaust Museum LA is the first and oldest Holocaust survivor founded Holocaust museum in the United States. In the 1960s, a group of survivors worked together to create a memorial for their loved ones who perished in the Holocaust, and this memorial eventually became Holocaust Museum LA. These survivors did so at a time when the community was by and large not ready to face this tragic history. Thanks to their courage and their foresight, these survivors established the first Holocaust museum in the United States with a mission to commemorate, educate, and inspire future generations. This morning, you have the honor and privilege of listening to Phil Raucher, who will share his story with you. And after Phil shares his story, you'll have an opportunity to ask questions. So during this program, please feel free to type your questions into the Q&A box or the chat feature. And Phil will answer as many questions as possible at the end of our program. Thank you so much, Phil, for joining us this morning. And you may begin whenever you are ready.
My name, I'm Philip Raucher. Some call me Phil, and I'm 95 years old. And per the German Nuremberg laws, I was supposed to be killed. They used several methods to accomplish their goal by shooting, gassing, beating, very little food, or working one to death. After the war, I did not talk to anybody about it because I had nightmares. Around 2017, I heard Elie Wiesel, he was about my age, say that he would rather be called a witness, not a survivor. And I agreed with him. And it encouraged me to tell what happened to me during the Second World War. Also, before I start, I don't like the word exterminate when it comes to people or human beings. To me, this word applies to ants, roaches, etc. My parents were not exterminated, they were murdered. And now I'll tell you where I come from. I lived on a plot of land that was very rich in coal. It was divided by a river called Brunitsa. West of the Brunitsa River, the German called it Oberschlesien because way back at one time it belonged to them. And the Poles called it Śląsk. East of the Zagłębie River, it was called Zagłębie. That was in Poland. I was born in a small city called Czeladz. It was near Katowice. Approximately 15,000 people lived in that city and about 1,000 Jews. I had a brother, a younger brother, and an older sister, a father, a mother, and we were all about 3 years apart in age. I was going to public school and belonged to the Polish Boy Scout group. And I also went to a Jewish school. I had Jewish and non-Jewish friends, and I was always invited for Christmas dinner to my Catholic friends. We had a movie house, and carnivals used to come to our city. We played soccer, rode bike, and played all kinds of other sports. We lived in a 2-story apartment building. We had 2 bedrooms upstairs and 2 bedrooms downstairs, and 1 cast iron coal operated heater that used the locally mined coals, and it will glow all night because the coal was kind of mixed with silver and gold veins, not all black. And when they started glowing, they glowed for hours. We had 2 businesses. We were where we rented horses and wagons to peddlers who were repairing roofs, and a hardware store in Rogenkow that was in Sloansk. All of a sudden, in 1938, that was a year before it started, everything changed. I was 11 years old when my public school introduced Christian religion in school, and the Jewish kids had to leave the room. At the same time, the Polish anti-Semites put up signs not to buy from Jewish stores, broke store windows and took whatever they wanted. They copied what the Germans did in Germany, and they call it Kristallnacht, or broken glass. German Jews who lived near the border, because our city was the last city in Poland. So the Germans that lived on the border on the other side in Germany, they were kicked out from Germany, and they all came to our city. And our parents and all the people organized and took them into their homes to stay with us and fed them and so forth. In school, the students organized and were attacking us with sticks and beat us up. So my parents took us out from the public school, and we had to go to a private school in the next city, which was called Benjamin. We had to travel to school by streetcar. It also was a problem because the high school students had to go to Benjamin because in Czeladz we did not have a high school. So we were being attacked by the high school kids, which was even worse. So the school tried to arrange different hours for us. So because of the arranging of the different hours, I was in 4th grade going through the instruction most of the time. So in reality, I finished 3rd grade only. In the meantime, Hitler
Hey, Phil, you actually muted yourself. So we cannot hear you right now. Press the microphone button again, and hopefully you should be unmuted and we'll be able to hear you. Do you see it in the bottom left of your screen?
Okay.
There we go. Now we can hear you loud and
to
clear.
type.
I don't know, but I'll keep an eye on it.
Okay.
All right, continue.
But anyway, the German Jews that lived next on the other side of the river were kicked out of their home, and my parents organized. And anyway, I guess I got to a point where I told you I finished 3rd grade only. In the meantime, Hitler announced that he wants Oberschlesien, and the Poles said, no way. And he started fortifying the border, which included Czeladz. it created a lot of fear. People did not know what to do. And so we had a grandfather who lived in a city called Wolbrom, which was approximately 50 miles east of us. So my parents decided to take me and my younger brother and sent us to my grandfather. I had to stop the phone. So we went to my grandfather. By that time, I was 12 years old and my brother was 9. However, my sister and my parents would remain home to protect our belongings and feed the horses. When we got to my grandfather's house, it was full of all kinds of relatives and friends that came also for the same reason. They came to Wolbrom because they were afraid of the Germans. That was in 1939. Finally, the Germans marched into Wolbrom. They burned down the synagogue, picked up young Jews and beat them badly. The next time, they picked up more people and forced labor. In addition, there was not enough food or place to sleep because there were so many people there and we were on their own. So we decided to go home. I told my aunt about it and she tried to talk us out of it and stop us, but we insisted. So she gave us some money and a loaf of bread and we went to the railroad station and I had to wait for 3 days because all the trains were going west, because all trains, they were going west, mostly east because of the war. And there was no train schedule and it was cold and rainy. But we had to sleep outside, but we did not give up. Finally, we got home. Our father was gone because we had horses. The Polish police drafted him and forced him to drive away from the Germans. And he wound up in Russian-occupied Poland. In Czeladz, they did the same thing as in Wolbrom. In addition, they closed all Jewish schools. We had to turn in all kinds of radio and any kind of whatever we had. And they ordered us to wear white armbands with blue stars on it and forbid us to walk on certain streets. They annexed our area to Germany and replaced the Polish police with the German police. To make a living, my mother sold whatever she could to bring in some food, money. And I was able to get a job at the German police station, polishing their shoes and cleaning the station. I was paid with leftover food that was left over in the police station. I was allowed whatever I could not eat at the station to take home, so that helped a little bit. Then every so often, the essays, every so often, meaning every 2-3 weeks, the SA, also known as the brown shirts, who were later replaced by the SS, kept coming into town and plundered the Jewish home and took whatever they wanted. Next, they started picking up children and older people who were unable to work. When we asked where they were being relocated, they said they're building special housing for them. So it didn't sound real good. So we had to find hiding places. Finally, my father came home and got a job stacking potatoes in a warehouse. About the same time, I lost my job at the police station because they moved to a street that I was not allowed to work on. So I had to get up early in the morning to get to this, because I had to walk on South Side Street and stack the.
Phil, unfortunately, you are muted again. I'm not sure how it's happening, but it is.
Oh, I unmuted myself now.
Yes, here you are. Go right ahead.
Okay, I stopped. I was stacking the potatoes with my father, but that was a real hard job because the bags weighed about 50 kilo a bag, which is equal to 110 pounds each. And so to lift up 110 pounds, I had to get a partner. Then we were not allowed to walk on any main streets, cross streets, and we had to move to a small side streets. The penalty for crossing a main street was to be arrested and disappear forever. The only place we could find was one room that could accommodate.
Phil, you're muted again.
It does it by itself.
Do you know if you might be accidentally pressing like the space bar or something? Because
No,
sometimes that
no,
activates
I
it.
keep my fingers away from it.
Okay. Well, I'll continue to be your lookout.
Okay.
All right. You can keep going.
The advantage of this room that we had was that the window was facing a rye field, which had big piles of this rye hull. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about, the rye hull. It's the thing that covers the rye before it's threshed out. And that hull was very sticky and made the skin itch a lot. So nobody wanted to get close to it. And that was a plus to us because we hide there when the Germans came. But no matter how much clothes we put on, that sticky stuff also stuck to our skin. It was very hard to get rid of it. Next, they came up an order that said that a family of 5, only 2 could stay home. The people that could not make the quota were picked up and taken away. So my mother stayed home, and because she was arranging all the food buying and arranging, because we had food stamps, there was never enough food. One time, 2 butchers were caught having some meat, and as a penalty, they ordered all Jews come to the city square and witness their hanging. Next, we had to move to a ghetto. they made us wear yellow stars in the ghetto sewed on to the outside of the garment. We created a hiding place in the attic because we lived in the ghetto in a two-story building. Then again, the law changed where a family of 5, only one could stay home and 4 people had to work, and for a German company. Because of that, I had to change job and found a job with a German-owned furniture factory. I had to get up 4 in the morning because I had to walk through fields in the dark to get to the factory to melt the glue for the cabinet makers. Next, they came up with a ruling that the star had to be sewed in on both the jacket and the pants. To make the star visible, we had to cut a hole in the garment.
Phil, you're muted again.
I wonder why that's.
It's so bizarre. You were muted for a second and then it came back by itself.
Yeah, now because I saw it, I moved it.
Yeah. All right. Continue, please.
Okay.
Thank you.
And Wolbrom was in German occupied Poland, not German itself. And they have different kind of laws. But the German occupied Poland with Zagłębie or Oberschlesien, where we live, they had a border, a strict border. And so to get to Wolbrom, we had to hire a smuggler to take us over that border. And it just so happened the smuggler could only take one person at a time. So obviously, because my brother was the youngest and could not work, he went first. And then my parents decided that once they hear that everything went okay, I'm going to be next. And sure enough, everything was okay. I packed my suitcases and was ready to go. As I was leaving, a neighbor came and told us that the SS came into Wolbrom and picked up all Jews, both young and old, taken away. After the war, we learned that they had been taken to a camp called Belzig. And upon arrival, they take to called a shower room, in which they pumped in diesel motor fumes, and they all were suffocated. It was luck, only luck, that it didn't happen to me. A few days later, the SS came in and took all the Jews, including me, who worked. They took us to a place called Sosnowitz. It's a city near us. And in Sosnowitz, they had what they called a dulag, where they picked up all from the area and brought them to this dulag to be selected where they should be sent, either to be sent to.
Phil, you're muted once again.
Okay, my parents somehow arranged to smuggle a bottle of soap water and told me to drink it before the selection started, so that I will start vomiting and the SS would let me go home. But I decided not to drink this water because I felt no matter where they would send me, it could not be any worse than it was now, and maybe it will be better. I was almost 14 old when I was selected to go to work. The next day, they gave us some food and put us on a truck, and we drove for approximately 10 hours. We finally stopped at a railroad station and immediately made us unload cement bags from the railroad cars to carry them to a warehouse. It was quite a distance. We had no food, no toilets, and it was raining. And the SS took over and started hitting us and yelled, "Run faster, run faster." And sometimes the bags tore apart and it spilled the cement and it made us look like concrete statues.
Phil, you just got muted again.
I worked like this for a while and got lucky because in the warehouse was a cement mixer. And the mix operator took a liking to me and asked me to stay in the warehouse to help him. He also told me that the camp people would determine where I would go to work, but I should request that they send me to him. And I did, but the copper got mad at me and beat me up real bad and yelled, "I am God, and only I will decide."
You're muted again, Phil.
Okay, the labor camp was called, it was called Markstadt in Germany. It was located near Breslau, and now it's called Wrocław.
You're muted.
When we arrived at the camp, they took us to the Pelzplatz called the assembly grounds. The lights came on and
You're muted again, Phil.
they took us to an open space to cut a 2-inch wide strip of hair on our head and ran from the front to the back. Next, they walked up and separated the people in groups of 40 per room. They picked one person to be our group in charge of the room. The next day at 5 a.m., we had to line up outside in front of
Phil, you're muted.
a piece of bread for breakfast. And after we came back from work, they gave us dinner, which consisted of a bowl of either potato or spinach soup. The spinach was hardly washed, and a piece of bread. By the way, this was done regardless if it rained or snowed, and every day the same menu outside. My job was I was assigned to carry wood joists from the railroad station on my bare shoulders. Obviously, the shoulders developed blisters that turn into
Bill, you got muted again. I think we might try, do you mind logging off the Zoom and coming back on and see if maybe that works?
okay.
Yeah. So
Okay.
if you go down to the red button in the lower right-hand corner
This one?
and you select that, you'll be logged out, but then use the exact same link that we sent you to come back in. All
Probably know
right.
it from our meetings. Here's a few things you might not know. You can transform your home office into a personal collaboration studio with Zoom for Home.
Okay.
Need room for more?
Do you see the red button?
This red button?
Yes, it should say end or leave.
Where does it say end or leave? My Dell. Zoom
Yeah.
webinar.
Yeah, so on the Zoom screen,
Click on Zoom webinar.
so yeah, so whatever screen you're on for Zoom, there should be in the lower right-hand corner a red button that says leave meeting.
It says leave webinar. You want me to leave webinar?
Yeah, and then you'll just come right back on by selecting that link that we sent. All right. I apologize everyone for the technical difficulties, but I guess we can take a moment right now. If anyone has questions that they want to catch up on, you can send them in through the Q&A box in the chat feature, and we'll just wait for Phil to reconnect. Again, I apologize. Hope everyone's having a good day. Here he
Okay.
is. All right, Phil, I'm crossing my fingers that this time everything's stable. All right, so
Okay.
please pick up where you left off. Thank you so
Okay.
much.
And that was okay, when we arrived in Markstadt, and when we arrived in Markstadt, they assigned me to work in this carrying the wood or the 2x4s, 6x4s from the railroad station to a construction site, because they were building factories for the Krupp company. They were building a munition or war material factory. And there was the factory where I worked, not in the factory, but building the factory. And obviously they developed a lot of blisters, but because I worked in this factory, I learned about wood, and I learned to recognize which is, when the wood was wet, it was very heavy. So I kind of picked out the lighter food, and I didn't get as many blisters. Then um, uh, can you hear me? Okay.
Sure can, yes.
Oh, okay. And I had to carry this wood, and that kind of saved me because I didn't have. Oh no, I was. Guess I stopped when I was carrying the cement from the railroad station to the warehouse, and or maybe I already told you about that. And we were assigned a room, and they assigned a guy that was in charge of the room. And one day, we come home from work, and the guy was missing. So they took us in. After we came home from work, they took us into a special room and to investigate if we knew anything about him, how and why he escaped. And obviously, we all said no, we didn't know he was doing what he wanted. And the camp leader somehow was in a good mood, and he was going to let us go. And then one guy from our group wanted to make it better. And he said, "Didn't I tell you when you got to camp that if you hear anyone or rumors that somebody is going to do something, you said no. So because you tell me, and because you didn't tell me, everybody will get 25 lashes." And and it'll start right now, the 25 lashes. And the lashes were made out of cow tails stuffed with wire. And they took us to a specially designed penalty enforcing room. And they had a table with cutouts where one puts in both hands and lock you up with the hands and the legs and start beating you. However, I was too small to fit in this contraction, so they couldn't tie me down and started hitting me without me being tied down. So every time I got a bit, every time I got hit, obviously I jumped up a little bit because it hurt. And they beat me up so bad that I could not go back to my room. And they had to carry me back to my room and declare that I was unfit to work. And they only gave you like 2 days that you can stay in the room. That if you don't get better, they haul you away. About the same time, they picked up my father and my sister and sent them to camps too. My mother was moved from Czeladz, where we lived, to the Benjamin ghetto. And then she was taken to Auschwitz and murdered on the same day of arrival. Again, by chance or luck, they brought my father to the camp I was in. He arrived one day before I was to be declared unfit for work. And he took me in his room, and the people in his room let them do it. After a few days, I went back to room on the same job. My father was selected to work on landscaping outside the camp. With him also worked some French and Czech workers. They were receiving Red Cross packages. They gave some of the food to my father, and he shared it with me. And that's how I got some extra food. The above lasted about 6 months because my father died at the job site. I don't know why he died, and I don't want to know. For some reason, the SS gave me two options. They said, either we dispose of the body or allow you, meaning me, to take to a designated place outside the camp and bury him by myself. Obviously, I choose the second option. I had to carry him and a shovel to bury him myself. And I don't have to tell you, there was some experience carrying my father, my dead father, to bury him. And the distance was almost a mile that I had to drag him. And finally I made it and buried him. I was almost 16 years when they moved me to another camp. When we arrived, we found out that it was a concentration camp called Fünfteichen. It was a subcamp of the infamous Gross Rosen camp. There were approximately 6,000 prisoners working on the construction site. They had to maintain the same amount of people all the time because it was a construction site. To maintain this number of people, they had to bring in approximately 500 or so people a week to replace the killed people. After we arrived, they took us to a shower. It had hot water. I remember that shower felt so incredibly good because I helped clean some of the pus from my blisters. However, it was cold outside, and they made us walk out one door to the shower and another outside to the outside of the shower. They gave us new clothes consisting of a blue, white jacket, pants, a hat, and wooden-soled shoes. They sewed on the pants and my jacket my ID number with a yellow stripe in front of them. The collar identified me as a Jew. They changed my name to a number, which was 25,414. And that's how I was identified. The barrack to which I was assigned was number 22. It consisted of 3 rooms. The center room was for the management of the barrack, and the rooms both to the side were the sleeping quarters for the prisoners. There were 3 bunk beds with a 1-inch layer of straw, and we had to adjust the straw to look like a piece of wood because they'd come in every day in the morning and inspect the bed, and if it wasn't straight, like the straw was not level, straight, they kept almost killing us. Right? They counted us 3 times a day. In the morning, number 1 was the SS would come into the room, to check if everything was adjusted properly. And if it was not, they beat us with rifles, and they counted how many people died from hunger or beating during the night. Next, we were allowed to go out to a toilet, which was a ditch. It was approximately 35 feet long, but 15 feet deep. And we had to sit on a long log. The problem was that every time we used it, SS people came in and started yelling "dirty Jews" and walked down and pushed the people into the ditch, and they obviously drowned. We had only water, cold water to clean up, and they did not give us any soap. Number 2 count was called exercise. The whole camp had to march to the assembly ground to exercise. It consisted of the following. With your right hand, take your head off and hit it against your leg. And the sound had to be all in unison. And if it was not in unison, they would walk around with their German shepherds and beat us to death. Everything has to be in sync. After that, gave us some food rations and we marched out to the job site. Number 3 was after we got back to work. They brought the food into the barracks and the rations were the same as in Markstadt. A few days after we arrived in Filmsteichen, a pimp approached me and told me that the camp leader is looking for young people to have fun with. Obviously, he was homosexual. He said, to start, you will get a job, take the empty dinner food canisters back to the kitchen, and you can scrape the leftovers food and eat it. It lasted about 3 months. I was not molested, but I lost the job with the food. At the job site, they started the roof because there was a big construction site that was 5 foot tall. And they brought in large wood girders that were approximately 40 feet long, 5 feet wide, 12-inch thick, and they were very heavy. We had to carry them from the railroad station to the job site. They picked 35 to 40 people to carry them on their shoulders. Well, their shoulders were sore, and they couldn't lift them up, and they were hungry. And the coppers stood behind it and whipped him like you were whipping horses. After they finally lifted him up and started walking, they could not hold him up, and the girder would come down on the people who could not get out fast enough, and they were squashed. I don't know how much a girder weighs, but I knew there were approximately 5 per railroad car. I was spared some of the beating because they gave me a crowbar to move the girders down from the railroad car to the ground. We had to distribute the purlins on the roof once the girders got up on the roof. Then we had to walk on the 12-inch girder with wooden shoes. And the building was about 4 stories high. And there was no safety precaution. So people were falling off the roof and killed every day. The camp leader could not understand why so many people were killed and went up to the job site to find out. I happened to be walking on a girder, and he was so impressed that he told his helpers to arrange to give me a double portion of food for a few days. It helped me some, but I can't forget the sight of the splashed dead bodies that fell off the roof, whom I had to carry away. One day, I woke up and felt like very sick and dizzy. I felt that in this condition, I would definitely fall off the roof. So during the first inspection, I pretended I couldn't move. So they took me to the so-called hospital. And you could only stay in the hospital for 2 days. At the same time, the Germans started to evacuate the camp because the Russians were getting closer. And because in the hospital, in the hospital they selected who can leave the camp. But because I didn't have any clothes, they gave me some clothes and said, you line up to go to work. And I was carrying my clothes from the place where they gave me the clothes back to the so-called hospital. There were sick, outside the sick bay, they decided that they would not be able to walk. They were crying and yelling. I felt so bad that I decided I'd give them my clothes, and I waited outside the sick bay. It was very heartbreaking. So again, I decided that I would stay in the sick bay, and whatever happens, have it happens. So because I was in the sick bay for a few days, I familiarized myself with the layout there, where the sick, really sick people are, where the dead people are. And what you know, the next day after everybody left, but I also knew that the SS would probably come in the sick bay to verify that all able-bodied people left. So I decided only one solution I had was to hide. And I saw this area with the dead people bodies, and I decided to cover myself with the dead bodies. And they inspected the area, and I heard them say that they're not going to go anywhere anyway, and let's go, meaning the SS to leave. And they left. After the camp people left, I decided the SS were, I noticed that the SS were replaced with older German and little dogs. And I noticed that something strange was happening. I found some clothes, and I walked into the kitchen. I found quite a bit of food there and ate what I could and took some to the sick bay, and no one there was to bother me. At the same time, several other people who were in hiding came out. We decided to break the gate and leave. As we were breaking the gate, we noticed that quite away, it looked like a group of people were coming closer to the camp. And they turned out to be Russian soldiers. After they came into the camp, we decided we circled around the Russian soldier. He asked if there was any bad people standing around him. One of the prisoners recognized one prisoner and pointed him out, and the Russian soldier, without saying anything, took his rifle and shot him dead and took off. And another person who was hiding, I and another person who was in hiding decided to leave the camp and decided to go home. But we had no idea where we were. So we started out on the road. And when we got to the first village, there were people there, but they but there were no people there in the first village home. And they left the clothes, so we changed into civilian clothes and continued on the road. As we walked down the road, the Russians arrested us and accused us of being spies. And they decided to kill us the next day. So during the night, we ran away. However, down the road again, they caught us again. And this time, they put us in a basement, a kitchen basement. And they was going to decide overnight what they're going to do. And the next morning, a Russian captain came down to us and said, if we were Jews, here's several Jewish words, and asked if he had actually been to a concentration camp. So he told us that they decided to kill you and opened the door and said that we get out as fast as possible. At the same time, we noticed that more people on the road had the same problem. I continued on the same road and was caught again, but this time they put me on a farm and asked me to take a flock of sheep and graze, and gave me a sheepdog to watch them. Once I went to the next big city to investigate how to take a train to go home. I took my dog with me. As soon as the Russians saw him or the dog, they offered me money for him. So I sold him and went back to the farm by myself. The next day, the dog showed up on the farm. So I sold him again and did several times until I accumulated enough money to buy a railroad ticket and to be able to go home. My friend and I separated because he went to his town and I went to my town. I got home and I was the first Jew in town. Only one neighbor offered me a place to sleep. And it was on the floor in an empty room. I had to beg for food. 6 days later, a friend of my parents came back too, and he had a lumberyard and started selling the wood. So we had some money and rented a place to stay. I hoped that my sister might be alive because she was in a camp and she might be sick or need help. So I went back to Germany to look for her, but I could not find her because the war was still going on. So I gave up and came back to my town. Next, an old Polish neighbor came to me and suggested that I live on a farm, on a farm, because he found out that the Poles in the city had plans to kill me. By that time, the war ended, and I felt I would try my sister again and I could not find her. And when I got back again home, my sister was in town. And I can't express, how emotional it was to find my sister after the war again. And we decided not to separate again anymore. So we decided that we were going to live together. She had a boyfriend by that time. At the same time, two Jewish friends came back, and the parents of one owned a bakery and the other one owned a hardware store in Czeladz. And one day, when my friends were in the store, the Poles came in the store and shot them dead. Because of what was happening, we decided not to wait any longer and left Zaglembie. We went to the Russian-occupied section of Germany and found a place in a city called Langenbilau to stay. To make a living, the Russian gave us ham, and we took the ham to Poland and sold it for vodka as payment. In the next city called Reichenbach, which is a Jewish community formed, and they found out that there was an American zone in Germany where the Americans treated the survivors well. So we decided to go to the American zone. We had no passport, no visas. We had to cross the Carpathian Mountains to get into Czechoslovakia. Next, we had a Red Cross. Next we had to cross the Czech and Austrian border. So we hid on a train when we crossed the border. Finally, we crossed the Austrian-German border, and it was because we attached ourselves to a group of Germans and pretended we were Germans, and they let us pass, and we ended up in Munich. Because of the large influx of Jewish refugees, the Americans built DP camps, or displaced person camps. However, we decided that we would never, ever go to a camp again. To find a place to stay, we went to a Jewish organization and helped us to find a place to stay. To make a living, we participated in the black market. By chance, I met a German who asked if we were willing to buy some valuable items from him because he needed money for food. And I agreed. At the same time, the Jewish underground contacted me and inquired if this German could also have access to guns. And the answer was yes. And so I was asked to carry all the guns to a predetermined area on the German-Austrian border, and they would pick up the guns from there. And they were going to the Jewish underground. At the same time, I decided to start training to become a pilot. And then they discovered that I was colorblind, so I could not give up the idea. After I was liberated, I felt there was something wrong with me. So I went to the doctor, to an MD, and discovered my eardrums were torn. I had hernias on both sides. I had a stomach problem, all left from the concentration camp I received, treatment I received. There was no way for us to go to the USA because we had no sponsor, and under the Polish quota system, we had to wait 10 years to qualify because I was under 17. I qualified to be an orphan. and was considered an orphan and was eligible to come to the United States. So my sister and I decided to split up because my brother-in-law was trying to get to Canada. And we decided he'll be in Canada, I'll be in the USA. We can see each other often. I came over on a Navy ship called Bletchford. About 2 days before arrival in New York City, the ship top deck broke in half. Little by little, they managed to put it into New York Harbor. Again, a Jewish organization helped me find a hotel, and I stayed in the San Francisco Hotel. I stayed there for a week, and it was a little overwhelming because in Germany, I lived in Munich. The population was about 400,000. So I asked around to see if anyone knew of a city of 400,000. Some people suggested Akron, Ohio. So I moved to Akron and soon discovered that it felt like a village, not a city. So I asked people in Akron what they do for entertainment. And some say, we go to Cleveland, Ohio. So I went to Cleveland, Ohio and liked it. So I moved there and got a job. After a while, I noticed that my 3 grades of education in Poland were not enough to make a living in Cleveland. And a system, and one of the systems that Cleveland had for night school was you had to start from grade 4 or 5 and graduate from junior high school. And then I continued also in the middle school. And at the same time, I went to school in Cleveland called the Cleveland Engineering Institute. And I learned how to draft. All this was done, I was working full-time and sometimes overtime. I had to pay for everything. After approximately 3 years living in Cleveland, I started sneezing uncontrollably. So I went to the MD and he told me that it sounds like I have hay fever and said to wait till next year to see if it comes back. It is hay fever. In Cleveland, they have, like over here, they have the weather prediction. They also have, they announced the pollen counts, because I was encouraged to pollen. And the pollen counts were not encouraging. They suggested buying their magazine that shows the pollen counts all over the country. I did, and listened to Los Angeles as having a low pollen count of the count that I'm allergic to. I immediately loaded my car with all my belongings and took off. I drove on the road for 10 days, including Highway 66, and arrived in Los Angeles. I stayed in a motel for a while until I found a drafting job. And in addition, I continued with my night school and graduated from Fairfax High School. At the same, I started mechanical engineering at UCLA night school, and I received a mechanical engineering certificate and joined the Mechanical Engineering Institute. I joined a singles group at the temple in Beverly Hills because I live near Beverly Hills. called Temple Emmanuel. And they had a singles group that had all kinds of dances and speakers. So when I joined them, I wanted to dance with them. I asked somebody to dance, and they would never want to dance with me because I was a bad dancer. So I decided to go to and learn the dance. When I finally learned to dance, all the girls wanted to dance with me. I picked one of the girls I took a liking to, and we hit it off. After we had been dating for a while, we decided to get married. We have 2 successful children and 2 grandchildren. And we see them often and emphasize to them that givers uppers never succeed. I add to my feeling to Theodore Roosevelt's quote, "Be nice and fair to everyone, but carry a big stick." That's by the end of my story.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Phil, for taking the time to share your story with us today. I've already gotten plenty of messages in the chat that our visitors, our virtual visitors, are very appreciative as well for you sharing. And now we have a bit of time for some questions. So again, I encourage everyone to put their questions into the chat, and Phil will be happy to answer them. I'll speak on your behalf and assume that you'd be happy to. So let's start with one in the Q&A box. So one visitor is curious about what got you through your time in the camps? What made you hold out hope?
Because I felt so bad how they were crying and yelling and screaming, because they knew that if they were left with the sick people, they'd probably kill them. But it was so bad, I just couldn't stand it anymore, and I gave them my clothes. I had to give them my clothes, so they can walk away, and I go back to the hospital. It's called a hospital. It wasn't a hospital. It was, they put you away for a while until they haul you away to be killed.
Thank you for sharing that, Phil. One of our visitors was really taken by kind of absurd circumstances you endured, even though it's horrific what you experienced. This visitor talks about how you had to exercise by clapping your hat against your leg.
Yeah.
Could you elaborate on that? Why would you be forced to do that? What was the reasoning behind all of that?
Well, we all had to do it, the whole camp. And they were exercising us. We had to pick up the head and hit it against our leg. And they wanted to hear all one sound. That was, you couldn't hear. And they were walking around with the German shepherds. And if they detected that somebody was maybe out of sync, they would beat them to death.
That is horrible, but thank you for sharing that. Did you get to see your sister again after you moved to the United States?
Yes, we saw each other. She couldn't come eventually to the United States, and she had to go to Brazil. They wanted to leave Germany. So we saw each other at least twice a year. She would come here, I go there to Brazil. It's quite a trip, but I managed.
That's wonderful. Was there a reason why she moved to Brazil?
Well, because that was the only opening she could go to, the only country that accepted Jews.
All right. Another visitor is wondering, was your family religious before the war? And if so, did your relationship with God change as a result of all the inhumane treatment you suffered and witnessed?
Well, I was never religious, neither was my father. But because we didn't participate too much in orthodoxy, like we used to go on bike rides with my father before on Shabbat, before the service started. But at the same time, we would invite yeshiva students, meaning college students, to ask for dinner on Friday night, because we always had Friday night dinner. So I was never too religious. But now, what happened to me, I don't believe in God because I heard astronomers say, if God created the world, then there must have been somebody that created God. Who was it? You see? So how can he believe in God? Because somebody must have created God. But I do believe in the sages, because they taught us civility, they taught us law, they taught us how to behave with each other. I believe in that. So if you want to call it that God, I don't know. But I do believe in the sages, but I don't believe it. I don't know what to call it, God.
That's a very powerful quote.
Yeah.
And that's a beautiful way to look at life. So thank you for sharing that. Kind of along those same lines, did you do anything in terms of spiritual resistance? What did that look like for you when you were in the camps?
When I was in camp,
Mhm.
there was no spiritual resistance, because you had to get up so early in the morning and you were always hungry. And to get your food, you had to wait in line. And then you had to go to work. And you were guarded by SS with rifles and wooden soles, shoes. And especially in the snow, the snow got into the shoe. And my feet froze. And I mean, there was no time. The only time we had was to wish that we can drown in a barrel of food. That's the only wish we had. When you're hungry and you're weak, they don't give you a chance. So.
Right. Yeah. I'm sure daydreaming became a form of your own personal resistance. But that's very interesting to hear about. Another visitor is curious whether you ever visited Poland again.
Yes, after the war. I found some pictures of my family that we left where we first lived in the basement, because everybody had a basement in Europe. A basement and a barrel to pickle sauerkraut, And in the box, I found some pictures of my family and me. If you want to see it, I can show you the picture of my.
Yes, I'm sure I can speak on behalf of
See,
all of our visitors who would love to see some photographs.
This is the city I lived. And this is the last job I worked for, this furniture factory, before I was taken away. And I'm trying to find my parents. And this is me and my parents. Can you see it? I didn't have a brother then. I'm the little one on the.
Yes, you're the middle child, correct?
Yeah. And because we had so many things coming to our town, entertainment, we used to go to, this is the two people that helped with us, with the kids, went to a carnival. Can you see better? And that's another time. It's a carnival. And that was before the war. No, wait a minute. There was, when the war started, everybody had to have an ID card. There was this picture taken. Well, this is it.
Thank you for sharing those beautiful photographs with us.
Yeah.
All right, I think that we have covered all of the questions that visitors have. I'll give everyone another moment in case there's something else that's been itching at them that they'd like to ask you. But in the meantime, Phil, do you have any kind of last words to sum up your story, or to kind of, I don't know, give to our virtual visitors today? Any words of wisdom?
Well, when I went back to Poland, I found my father was buried. I buried him. But it was an open field and there was no markings. I put some glass in the ground, but who knows where it is. So I know the cemetery where he is. That's all I know.
And how do you feel kind of just not knowing? Is that kind of the hardest part?
Not knowing.
Just the only kind of thing you know is the cemetery.
Yeah.
So what is it like not knowing any other kind of information? Do you prefer it that way, or do you wish?
Well, how can I find out?
Well, yeah, exactly.
I have an idea. When I buried him, when I dug it up, which corner of the lot there I put him, what I saw from the place where the grave is. But I don't know if it was turned around or who knows.
Oh, that's very powerful. Well, thank you again so much, Phil, for sharing your story. And if no one has any other questions, I think we'll wrap up our dialogue for the day. Thank you all so much for being wonderful participants, and for staying patient with us during all the weird technical difficulties with the mute button. But I'm glad we got through that and that we got to hear your incredible, remarkable story, Phil. So thank you again, everyone, for joining us today. And on behalf of Holocaust Museum LA, I say thank you.
One other thing
Yeah,
I
what's up?
want to say. In my city, where I said there was over 1,000 Jews, only 20 survived. Only 20 survived.
Wow. That's, wow. It's hard to fathom, but wow. Well, thank you again, Phil. Always appreciate you giving your time to share your story with us. And once again, thank you all for joining us. And please enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you so much. Bye, Phil. Bye, Virginia.
I can check myself out, right?
Yes, I will do that for you.